All right, so I'll do a quick introduction of the drawing, a real quick sketch, so that we can create our first prism, start to look at some of the boundary conditions, and then maybe put a tolerance or two on it, just to illustrate the flatness and parallelism. All right, so my intent is, as I'm kind of exploring these options, is to start to make those trapezoidal, rhombic, all those fun shapes, and then see what it does to our tolerance zone. So pretty much I'm going to stay over in the feature manager. Once we pick a place to sketch, so I'm just going to go straight to how I would like you to do this. I will put the links for the other for the YouTube channel with this video, or with these two videos for the introduction and the other one. I usually start a page to accumulate the media, so you have one place to look. And I'll go right to what I would like you to do, and then if you're interested or you're taking the Solidworks class, then it'll be kind of part of that process that you'll get the rest of the information as we go, and we'll build into it. So on the right mouse button, or if let's see if that's working correctly. If I single click on the plane, it should come up with that pop-up, except my mouse is, there we go. Mouse, I'm doing the button happy second click that lets me rename it. So the top left, if I hover over that, is telling me that it's a sketch. And as soon as I go into the sketch, I can tell that I'm in a sketch because I have the red origin, and we have the confirmation corner in the upper right. And once I click out, I'm going to see that plane go away that I don't really need. And on the bottom left, the reference triad is showing me I'm in an XY orientation and the front plane. So those visual clues are kind of the first, that red origin being the one that I'm going to key in on the most. And then in the bottom right, I mentioned on the status bar, we are now going from editing the model to editing the sketch, and my current status is underdefined. And the underdefined status says, well, I haven't drawn anything, first of all, but it can move or move unexpectedly. And then as I'm moving around, you'll see those numbers shift because that's the current location. I'm not really going to focus on those. There's other information that I do want to pull from that information. All right, so I'm going to go up to the upper left, which is the sketching tools. And in the first box, we're going to have lines, circles. We're not going to deal so much with splines until we get to surface profiles. And ellipses, just kind of going clockwise, the sketch fillets, the polygon, the slot, our rectangle is where we're going to start. And then in the middle is the three types of arcs. So anywhere you see the arrow, you're going to be able to pull down and make another selection. A center point, tangent, and three-point arc. And each one of those has a different rule that you have to follow to generate that geometry. Once, right now I'm in the symbol for the center point arc. I will stay in center point arc until I select something else, and then it will stay in that until I select something else. So if it's active, then we're ready to go. So right now I'm in the corner rectangle. I'm going to move over and select that rectangle. If I need to change the style, so that pull down has a center, it has a three-point corner, a three-point center, and then that parallelogram. And if we need to make the different sizes, we're going to be able to just pick those if we didn't already do the pull down. Visual clues, you're seeing the little blue lines pop up. Those are the inference lines that are showing me that I am horizontal or vertical to the origin for that selection point. And right now it is a white background on my white background, so there's not any real differentiation there. But when it goes to yellow, so when I get close to the origin, that coincident icon shows up and it says I'm close to the origin. Now I can left click and drag, or left click, release and drag and click again, and that will create the rectangle. So I'll commonly call those as the click method or the click and drag method. All right, so whichever one you're more comfortable with. So for our size, let's go ahead and hit the right mouse button and go to select. And if you grab the corner, because this is underdefined, it's able to move. So the lower left, if you didn't happen to get that inference, so if I click on that that point, I see the little relation icon, and over on the property manager, I see that point and I see its relation icon or relation description. And that's what's causing the vertical line and the horizontal line to become to be black. And then the blue lines are the ones that can move. So picking on the point shows me that it's coincident. Picking on the line shows me that it's vertical. And picking on the horizontal line shows me that it's horizontal. So somewhere in that mix, if you have something that looks like, I'm going to go up to the view and hit the little down arrow next to the eyeball. If you have something that is to show all of the relations, at some point, oh, they're not green anymore. All right, so for 2019, they're not green. I'm used to saying all of those little green boxes that get annoying, and they go and screw me up for 2019. No, not that bad. But at some point, these little boxes will start to take over. You will accumulate so many relations that this will can almost guarantee it will get annoying. And at that point, we'll go back up. And I think they're on by default, so if you want to turn them off, that little arrow right there next to the eyeball will come down to View Sketch Relations, about halfway down on the left. Click on it, and then only what we're selecting is going to show the relations, that it's coincident and that it's vertical. All right, so for our purposes, we're going to place a dimension, so I can go into the Smart Dimension in the upper left. And when I pick on an object, right, I want to avoid its midpoint. Right, so as I go along that object, it'll be a little clearer. I want to avoid that midpoint and pick and place. All right, so once I've selected the dimension, now it's going to ask me what to enter for its value. So 1/2 inch would be fine. So if you have something that looks like the asking you for a value while you're dragging, that's kind of an Autodesk, the way Autodesk manages some of their items, where as I'm dragging, I can enter the value. The problem is that value really doesn't get applied as a dimension or participate in making this a fully defined sketch. So pretty much if I right mouse button, the only one I'm really looking for is the Smart Dimension. The Replace and the Sketch Numeric Input shouldn't be turned on right now. And then for the length, we'll go in, and I'm close to 2.5, so when I hit enter the 2.5 value, that'll bring it to size. Right, so the parametric portion of this, and I'm going to stay at 2.5, but I'm going to illustrate that I want to see what it looks like at 2. I can enter a value of 2, and the rectangle shrinks. When I double click on it and put the 2.5 back in, then it will grow back to 2.5. All right, so right now I have an enclosed region. If there was any gaps or any overlaps, then that would affect the feature that I'm going to create. So pretty much because I drew this as a rectangle, the rectangle is not going to generate any gaps. So when I switch over to features, then our possible features are the boss base, or to create a revolved boss base. And when I click on the extruded boss base, I'm going to give it a blind end condition. And as we get more complex in the geometry, then we'll have other end conditions that we'll want to use. And so we're at 2.5, so I'm going to go to 2 inches. And that gives me my starting shape. So let's see, I haven't created a folder. I typically am saving these to my cloud drive, so we jumped over to that. And so I'm going to create a new folder. So let's see, we have the 20, I mean, however you want to name it is fine. My documents, someplace where you can recover it. And I'm going to put the course name, have that. And then I'll just give it an example 1. And then I'd say go ahead and make it a habit that when we start turning some of these back in, put your initials on the tail end of it. So when I'm downloading it, if I put it in the wrong folder or realize I put it in the wrong folder, I have a half a chance of going through and identifying it. All right. So now we have this theoretical perfect prism, and we're not going to spend too long on this first example. So if I get ahead of you or you have questions, we'll take those in lab. So we have a couple of methods to start looking at the tolerance zone. So 0.5 by 2.5 by 2 is our sizing, and we want to be able to visualize what those tolerance zones can look like. So the first one, let's say that we're going to have flatness across the top, and let's see. First one, I'll generate a plane, and these are going to be very similar in the creation, but not so much in. We'll see. I'm going to say they have kind of different methodologies. So under the reference geometry, if I go into the plane, then we're going to have that first reference, second reference, and third reference. So when I pick a face, if we're doing plus or minus 5, then 0.005 would be the tolerance zone for the upper limit of that geometry. And then I can hit OK. When I hit Control 1 and go to the front plane, I'm going to see that 5 thousandths is very narrow, a very narrow gap to contend with. All right, so one more, and this is going to be kind of the downside to picking the planes, is that I'm going to have to do this twice for each of the bodies or each of the faces that we pick. So we're already at 5 thousandths, or we were already at 5 thousandths. What did I? Oh, plane 1 was pre-selected, so I have to watch that. So I need to clear those out. So that wasn't the best selection, but it's probably one that's going to come up fairly often. Is I can clear those out, and I'll come back and grab the face, and I want to make sure it says face and not plane, since that plane is active over there. And we're still at 5 thousandths. The arrow is pointing up, so when I flip its offset, now I should be able to see a tolerance zone. All right, so we have an upper and lower limit that is plus or minus 5 thousandths. All right, so if I was looking at taking this block and putting a mate reference to another block in the assembly, I could look at what those tolerance zones are overlapping each other, or what they do as far as gaps or any kind of interferences there. All right, so probably my preference then is a little bit easier to work with. I can open a sketch on that face, so highlighting the end face, I'm in the front view, which would either be Control 1 or coming up to the pull down. Let's see, what is that one called? Should be Views, since it's not bringing up my tooltip kind of in the middle, and going to that front center Control 1 and picking on the face, and the bottom left second one in is the sketch. Right? So if I create a sketch, and I'm going to draw a line, one on the interior and one on the exterior, and I'm not really going to worry about defining these right now and getting them to go fully defined. Later on, my obsession with little blue dots, I will start freaking out and have to do something with the little blue dots. But when I select a dimension between the edge and the line, 0.005, and it's going to round to up to 10 thousandths, so I'm not too worried about that because that's where my units are at. And when I identify that, then I'm going to have to make that correction in the units. All right, and then selecting between the edge and the line, 0.005, and that would just be a sketch that I could visualize on the one edge, right, where the plane goes all the way across, and I can see where the intersection of those planes are to other geometry. The lines aren't going to be as noticeable or as prominent. So one of the things that we don't do very much in the Solidworks class is surfaces. And if I go to an extrude, I want to see if this will first of all do both contours at the same time. So the top one and the bottom one. All right, so the advantage here is it's showing both of them. It should create two bodies. And I want to reverse the direction, but I don't really want to put in that value, because if I decide to grow or shrink this part, then I want the surface to update automatically. So if I tell it up to next, then it should terminate at this back face. So that gives me an in condition to work from. So let's see what we get. All right, so where we didn't have surface bodies before, now I have two surface bodies. And I can look at that, what would be the lower bound and the upper bound, because we're on the bottom. And depending on which one of these we assign flatness, the other one would naturally be parallelism. Right? So as we look at each of those items, the interior one's not going to be as apparent, but I can highlight it and see where it ends up overlapping. The surface and the plane, because they both end up being planar entities, I'm going to be able to select those in the assembly and see where those overlap, where those gaps. And then also I would be able to apply mate relations to look at the stack up. So this is more of a visual, being able to see where those tolerance zones are and get used to the concept of a tolerance zone. When we actually get into the dimensions and start applying the dim expert and the tolerance analysis, then those will kind of take over and say, well, if this adds up to this and this adds up to this, our result is X. Right? But that's not going to give us a visual representation the way that this would. All right, so to manage these, I can right-click on the surface bodies and go to the eyeball and say hide, or to the two planes and select one of those and hide, or the little flyout, because it's Windows, there has to be 3 or 4 ways to do everything. I can hit the little caret and it will, or greater than symbol, less than symbol, and I can click hide to get back to my base geometry. All right. So in its worst case, we would identify our critical dimension, our flatness, A datum, and apply that tolerance zone to it just to get that visual reference depending on what it's going to be doing in the assembly. So when we build up and we have more geometry to work with, those will become a little more important. All right, so we're going to apply a let's see, location, size, datum, geometric tolerance. All right, so I want to say 2018 and before this would still be dim expert. Anybody seeing MBD dimensions or MBD on your tabs? All right, so I'll have to come around and check on those, but this has had the several names, but dim expert or dim expert manager is probably the most common. And then the model-based definition is using the dim expert dimensions and tolerances to define it. So if we go into a geometric tolerance, we're going to get the full feature control frame. All right, so our first encounter will be to pick a symbol, and as we drag through there, first upper left is straightness, next one over to the right is flatness. That's good for a start. So when I pick on that, it shows me flatness of 20 thousandths. We are in inches, so that's pretty generous. Probably could hit that without too much problem, but if we need to change it, let's just make it 10 thousandths. All right, so since we built a plus or minus 5 tolerance into our planes and into our surfaces, really this is going to be represented that the 10 thousandths is 5 thousandths above, 5 thousandths below. and then we'll hit OK. And apparently my tolerances are either off. Nope, didn't export annotations. Okay, or I didn't click the right thing. All right, so to make sure that they're shown is we're going to come back over to the feature tree, right click on the annotations, and the show dim expert annotations are there. So maybe I didn't have it picked, or I should have picked it afterwards. If you picked, then it should be up there. Oh, there it is. It highlighted. All right, so one of the things with the dim expert, you're going to have to look at this right mouse button context and make sure that it's selected for the plane. And then I'm going to try that again, flatness and 10 thousandths. And this time, instead of seeing the gray, I kind of see it highlighted in blue, so let's see what that generates. All right, so annotation, notes. Oh, we need to be in the dim expert. All right, so it is either looking for the location or I didn't apply enough. All right, a good place to stop while I figure out what I'm telling it to do. All right, so pushing buttons a little previous to what I needed. We're picking. We'll take the flatness. I'll assign the 10. And then we need to pick the face, and that was what I was not doing, was picking the face, and then you can place on the feature, hit OK. And now when I rotate around, we're going to have those features assigned to those surfaces. At the extension line, we're going to be able to drag those around and move them to different positions. And then at some point, because this is an annotation, it's not really driving anything. It's in reference to what we've created. I'll come back over to, well, I guess I don't need to. There's the annotations. It popped up. So if I right-click on annotations and turn off the show dim expert annotations, I can toggle those on and off as needed. So as we're working with them, they're on. And then when we're doing more design type stuff, we can turn them back off.